Hello. I was excited to share about an experience that I had this past weekend. We went camping with the kids, and um, the title of this talk is called "We Don't Know What We Want," and also we don't know what things are for. And I'm going to share what I mean by that through an example of what happened to me and my family and my kids this past weekend. So I had planned, this happens all the time, right? We make plans. I had planned to go on a camping trip for whatever reason. You get that feeling of excitement, you get that feeling of inspiration, or you're drawn towards something for whatever reason. We may feel that it's for a certain reason, like to have fun. Why would I go on a camping trip? To connect with my kids, to have fun, to experience nature, to relax, to connect with my partner, all of the things, right? Those are sort of like the expectations. But we don't really have control over how things play out. Um, we don't have any control at all. So, although we may have some form of expectation for what we're trying to get from that, I have found it so relaxing and so it feels so much more true to just realize that I actually don't know what I'm gonna get from basically anything. Like, good morning, I have no idea what's coming my direction. I might have, there are patterns that play out, there are cycles, there are habits and things like that, but really we don't know. So this camping trip that we went on really made that obvious to me because it actually wasn't fun and it was not relaxing. The moment that we got out of the car, we realized that it was far too hot to be on this camping trip with kids. And so all of my plans started to need to shift. I had to get the kids out of the sun, find something preferably with water to cool them off, that sort of thing. And what would normally have been sort of relaxing. I mean, there's some setup and stuff had to be done very quickly, um, which is fine. But I started to notice during the trip that just having the conditions being a little uncomfortable, it started to bring up triggers for me, very obviously. I noticed that it was like magic. Like all three of my kids, the older ones, started doing certain behaviors that would trigger me, and they really weren't doing anything wrong at all. It wasn't even about them. It was just that I had let myself get to a state of somewhat uncomfortability. My expectations had been let down a little bit, and through that, all of the things that usually probably do trigger me in my everyday life, and I'm just not aware of it, were being made very clear to me because I was already in a state of uncomfortableness. Now I was like, oh, okay, this is what the trip is for. I thought the trip was for, A, B, C, D, and E, but I see very clearly now that my excitement, my draw towards this trip was actually for this reason, to become more familiar with some of my unconscious triggers, I guess, or habits that are playing out in my everyday life that I really wanted to take a closer look at. And although that may be slightly uncomfortable in the moment, just upon realizing that and seeing it for what it was and seeing it for what it's for, um, I get greeted with a sense of relief, right? And suddenly everything takes on new meaning and it just feels good. It feels fulfilling and it feels, I don't know, it has a sense of like making sense rather than before. If I were very convicted in my belief that I actually do know what things are for, and this trip was for relaxation and excitement and whatever, the conditions of it. It needed to be the conditions to have fun. If I was very convicted that that's what the trip was for, I would have been greeted with the emotions of frustration and anger and bitterness and disappointment and all of that. And that really is not because having a too hot camping trip that's not going to work out the way that you thought. In fact, we chose to leave early because it just wasn't what we thought. It's not because that is actually disappointing, or that it's actually frustrating, or that's actually a bummer. Not at all. It's only the way that we're looking at it. It's because we're so convicted that we know what things are for and that we know what we want. As soon as we can see it in a slightly different light, it's like the lens just shifts. It's like shunk, and all of a sudden, enjoyable emotions can be felt. And yet again, it's not even because the camping trip is enjoyable now. It's not from it's external at all. It's always internal. And then I'm realizing that what is playing out for me, what is happening for me, holds the keys for my own awakening, holds the keys for me to see what I really want, which my conscious mind is not good at at all. In fact, I don't think that's what it's built for. But whatever it is, the higher mind that likes to play out these scenarios and show us what we really want, if we choose to stay open to that, then it seems like it's just so much easier to find joy and peace, and it feels so true. And this lesson has been playing out for me pretty consistently throughout the summer, and we're going on a little trip on Monday too, to take the kids to this like resort thing with like a water park, and I'm just so excited to play with these perspectives. Like, I have no idea what this trip is for. I have no idea what I really want. I'm just gonna go and experience it and let life show me what it's for. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that we can't like get excited for things or anything. In fact, I believe that what we're drawn to with our heart is totally meaningful, and that's the key. That's how you're drawn towards experience, and experiences can flow, is following that. It's just that it's not about having expectation for how it's going to actually play out, because we don't know what we want and we don't know what it's for. Yeah. I had another experience that was very similar to that earlier in the summer. We were supposed to go on a trip to Yosemite for a week, a big trip. It was our big vacation for the summer with the kids, camping in the woods. And then about a week before, or maybe 2 weeks before, the car that we were going to take, so my car, the engine overheated, and the car ended up being totally ruined. Like, I need a whole new car, or a whole new engine, which is basically like the car. and I decided to cancel the trip. And it was interesting in this scenario. I think it's because I have been practicing with triggers for so long. I really wasn't bummed. I was not bummed. I was like, oh, okay, that trip that's not what we're doing right now. That's not where it was, right? And that little scenario was really easy to just bloop, breeze right through because of perspectives like these. And I noticed there was another thing that had come up through this, though. And that was, what did have a little hook in me was like, oh man, my kids aren't getting that nature experience that I wanted. That's what it was. My kids are not getting out in nature, and I really want to expose them to nature. And I'm sure that's something that a lot of parents feel. And it's not, and I'm definitely not saying that we shouldn't put them out in nature, but I just noticed that I had a slight bias. I had a little bit of a bias, like, I know what's best, and I'm going to dictate what is best. And of course, if we're feeling excited to go out and get our kids in nature, like, cool, follow that. But like, life was showing me something different. It wasn't even about nature. It wasn't about the forest. It was about me thinking I know what's best for everything and where the healing and where the growth and where the awakening is going to come from. It's going to come from nature, kids. That's where we're going to get it, out in nature. And I'm just starting to realize that it's really not from anything. It's not from anything outside of yourself. That's impossible because there is nothing outside of ourselves. Like, the whole thing is not, it's sort of like a projection and an illusion. And we're sort of creating it as we go. We are the ones who projected the world. That's becoming very clear to me. So this was a way, because you see how life does it. You can use a term, you can use higher self maybe. You can say you can see how higher self does it. It likes to use the places that your biases. It likes to use the places that you have placed importance on, taboo on, oh, that's bad, that's good, that sort of thing. And it'll use that in your experience to disappoint you or lift you up until you figure out that that's not where the happiness is going to come from, and that didn't really matter. It wasn't ever really external. It was always an internal game. And like I said before, that doesn't necessarily mean that you never go for a walk through nature, you know? It just means that it's not actually in nature. It's not actually outside of yourself. So, so after the camping trip didn't play out in Yosemite, I was very open for, okay, well, what is it then? What is it this summer? And maybe it's nothing, but what ended up happening for me was some space opened up where possibly there might not have been, because if we went on this big trip, you know, we probably wouldn't have been doing little other trips as much. So we ended up going out to Palm Springs, just on a whim to visit my sister. And there was so much healing involved in that. It's so funny because some of the stuff that I was drawn to, naturally after that, like I said, like following your excitement, I was so excited about taking the kids to this little resort that we're gonna go to, taking the kids to like a water park, and then going to Palm Springs to go play in a pool and like walk around the shops. And I just was met with the contrast. I'm like, oh, it's not nature. Like, my kids are missing out on nature, and why am I drawn to, you know, sort of like man-made concrete things? That's what's going, these are the thoughts that were going through my head, thinking that, like, I don't know, like something's missing or something. And it was just very obvious because of the contrast. I was like, oh, it doesn't matter. That's right. That's probably why, beneath it all, I'm being drawn to these other things to show that it doesn't matter what it is. You can find it anywhere you look. And it's all about just listening here. So as we went to Palm Springs, there was just so much healing available for my sister and I's relationship. It was like magic, healing some past things that had happened. And it was effortless. I wasn't intending to do that. I just showed up. It just felt right, and I just showed up. And we ended up staying the night at my sister's house, which was something that I wouldn't have done a long time ago. And I believe there was something in that exchange between all of us that was really like breaking cycles. It was breaking storylines and cycles from a life that we used to live. And it was just so, it was just so great. I don't know how to describe it other than that. It felt really awesome. So it was just one example. That was just an example of how it's really not out there. It's not in anything. It's here. And all we have to do is listen and show up. And it really helps get to the bottom quicker if we're not so convinced that we know what we want and we know what it's for. If we just let go a little bit and let life show us, it becomes very obvious. And we join the flow. And I think that about sums it up for this talk. Thank you.